So welcome everyone to this webinar about how you can use automation to optimize your talent funnel for lower time to fill. This topic is a little bit of a different one for us at TARS because we generally focus on pure play digital marketing topics in our webinars. But I mean, if you've been in the staffing game for some time, you obviously know that staffing, especially if you're doing inbound, is a digital marketing game at the end of the day. So we're going to talk about some CRO techniques that you can use to improve your conversion rate and to supercharge your talent funnel. So let's begin. As always, we like to start our webinars with intros, just to tell you who we are, give you some context around where our knowledge is coming from, so that you guys have a better sense of where this information is coming from. To begin with, I'm Arnav. I am the regular host on these webinars. I am a marketer over here at TARS, and essentially my job is to create content just like this webinar to help you guys achieve more at your workplace. I'm privileged to be joined today by Alex Sommers, VP of Strategic Communications from Staffing Future. Welcome, Alex. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Hey. Yeah, hi. Thanks, Arnav. Yeah, awesome to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me here on the webinar. We're super excited to kind of talk a little bit about not just what Staffing Future does, but how we partner and be able to utilize staffing technology that sits in and around the website, because that's really our focus as an organization, is not just building beautifully designed websites, but making them tech enabled that it can drive revenue, drive leads, and engagement. So yeah, definitely excited to be here today.
Right. I mean, it's really our privilege to have you on. So thanks for joining. Now, to tell you a little bit about both our companies, TARS has been around since 2016. And in that time, we've helped not just marketers, we've helped people across industries, if you're in recruiting or staffing as well, boost their conversion rates using conversational tech. And that's the sort of elevator pitch description, which we give if we are short on time. But since we have a little bit of time in the session, let me explain to you the full story of what exactly TARS is and what we've been doing for the last now 5 years, I guess. Using conversational tech to increase conversion rates is just a part of the story. When we started out, I think our founders are both on this webinar actually. We started out because we felt that the way businesses were interacting with individuals was broken. We're in the era of digital marketing where you can get everything done online. But unfortunately, a lot of the digital experiences that people have when they're navigating the web, whether they're buying a product, whether they're applying for a job, they're often broken. They don't feel as good as they ought to in 2016 at the time, but 2020 or 2021 today. And we wanted to solve that. And the solution that we came up with was conversations. If we can facilitate more conversations between businesses and their stakeholders, then we would be able to improve the way people interacted with businesses online. So we built a product around that. The industry eventually, I guess, caught up with us, and this term chatbot came around, and it kind of described what we were doing anyway. So we adopted it, and that's how we became the TARS that you know, hopefully know now today. But that's enough about TARS. We're joined today by Staffing Future, where Alex works, and Staffing Future has obviously a much more experienced past in the staffing game. So Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Staffing Future does?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's basically kind of our pedigree when it kind of goes back to kind of who we actually are in the operational side of things. Talking about our two co-founders, Jack Copeland and Bruce Stander. You know, I'm really the dumb guy in the room, and I have almost 10 years of experience when it comes to staffing solutions. You know, starting working with like Broadbean Technology when it was about automating the job distribution and source tracking back into the applicant tracking system, you know, to coming here at Staffing Future, where it's really just leaning into the technology, you know, where we're not even, we even don't call ourselves a full marketing firm like any other type of web development company, because for us, it's about, yes, building a custom design site, but making sure that that site is fully tech enabled and automate the workflows where you can. You know, the chatbot is definitely a vital piece when it comes to engagement of those candidates or site visitors that come to your site and building those profiles, and it works in conjunction with our approach to drive leads and make sure that not only is it just like a business card website, but then that website is actually a revenue generator, and it's a vital piece of your marketing strategy because it is your digital storefront. So our CTO, Bruce Stander, he's been building staffing websites since 2003, where we have over 50 years of experience within the marketplace to be able to help our clients, specifically in the staffing industry, represent themselves to their market.
Awesome. Glad to have you on. Glad to have all of that expertise behind you on this webinar, sharing it with our audience. Now, to give you guys a brief sense of how the next hour or so is going to go, we've divided the webinar up into 4 parts. In the first part, we're going to go through the basics. We're going to tell you a little bit about what exactly it is we are talking about on this webinar. So we're going to give you a basic lay of the land of what the process we're talking about is, what sorts of improvements we're suggesting in this process. And then in parts 2 and 3, we're actually going to talk about those improvements. So we've divided it up into 2 parts, pre-click and post-click optimization. Alex is mainly going to focus on the pre-click part, and I'm going to focus more on the post-click part. And we'll get into what exactly these terms mean in the first section, in the basics section. Finally, in section 4, I usually like to keep this section as long as possible. We're going to have a Q&A session where you guys will have access to us to ask us questions if you have any, and we'll do our best to answer them to the best of our abilities, obviously. If you guys don't have questions, no promises, exactly. Yeah. If you guys don't have any questions, though, we can end the session early and we can go about our days. It just means that Alex and I have done a good job of explaining everything in the first 3 sections. Fingers crossed, indeed, knock on wood. But let's get started. Let's talk about the basics first. What exactly is the process that we are discussing today? So when you're thinking about staffing, and when you're thinking about doing it in an inbound way where you bring traffic to your sites and then get people to submit applications, this is the basic process that any candidate goes through at the top of the funnel. They're a prospective candidate. They're out there. They're sitting on their couch. Oh, looks like my video is being cut off a little bit. They're out there. They're sitting on their couches. They're hanging out at home today, I guess, because everything's work from home. And you want to get that prospective candidate who has a set of skills that your client wants to apply for a job that you have. So what do? You use whatever channels that you are using. We'll get into that in the pre-click section. You use those channels to bring people to your staffing site. You present them with the information that they need to know about the company, to know about the job. And then once you convince them when they're a site visitor, the next stage is to convert them into a candidate where they actually submit details to you and enter your talent funnel. And what we are talking about today is how you can get more people from this first stage of being a prospective candidate out there sitting on their couch to being a candidate that's in your funnel that you can follow up on and try to hire. So we're going to talk about how you can get more people from stage 1 to stage 3, because if you can get more people from stage 1 to stage 3, it's going to make your job a lot easier. And also not just getting more people from stage 1 to stage 3, but getting more people from stage 1 to stage 3 quicker, because obviously that's what we're discussing today. We want to reduce your time to fill. And broadly speaking, we've divided this up into the pre-click side and the post-click side. So getting prospective candidates to your site and then converting people on your site into actual candidates. Now, this is a bit of an approximation, because I think Alex is actually going to talk quite a bit actually in his section about what you can actually, not only getting your targeting right and getting your channels right to bring people to your site, but he's also going to talk about the sorts of optimizations you can do on your site to keep people there before they actually before they actually submit their details to you to become a candidate. And what I'm really going to talk about in the post-click side of this webinar is how you can actually collect the details from your site visitors to convert them, because that's at least I think that's something that a lot of folks, be it in digital marketing or be it in staffing and recruitment, don't really talk about enough. We sort of take forms for granted. We take them as the only way to capture information. But we're going to show you that there is actually a different way to do this and a better way to do this. So that gives you a lay of the land of what exactly we are talking about over the course of this next of this next hour, or actually this next 30 minutes or so. Alex is going to talk about the pre-click side, where you can bring prospective candidates to your website and then keep them there. And then I'm going to talk about the post-click side, where you actually take those site visitors who are on your site and get them to submit their details to you, because just getting them on your site is only half the picture. So I'm going to hand it over to Alex to talk a little bit about the pre-click optimization side and how Staffing Future figures into that.
Awesome. Yeah. And the pre-click optimization really kind of starts really at the foundation of your website, and at the top of the wheel here at the custom design. Now, design is definitely subjective. There's definitely websites that we have gone live with for our clients where I'm not maybe the happiest with the design, but really what I'm getting at, it's not necessarily about like the pictures and the content, even though that is definitely vital to get your message across. It's actually the architecture and how it is actually built, where it's about trying to automate the workflows of these visitors that are coming to your site, and trying to start build a profile of understanding who's coming, where they're coming from, and how do we actually capture those unique tracking markers to be able to set up this post optimization type of world that we're going to be getting into. So design aspect absolutely is being able to build out that site that one gets your message correctly, but that the core architecture of that site is designed that it has specific workflows for these visitors to follow. Now, typically when it comes to a candidate, are they coming there for a job? Are they coming there for a salary guide? Is there gated content that we can put in there to be able to capture information and start building those profiles? Yeah, that is all part of the implementation, the design aspect of how we actually come at it when it comes to the website build it itself. Now, a piece of that build out is obviously trying to make sure that your site is actually going to be found when somebody's putting in a question on that Google search bar. So that is the idea of being able to optimize search engine optimization when it comes to the custom design. So yeah, your H1, your H2 tags, of making sure that your descriptions are going to be put in there, but also what are you doing with your contextual linking within that site? And how are you going to be able to build that site domain so that you are an authority within your actual marketplace? So it all starts at that very beginning of when you're talking about a website design, is making sure that it's built with a solid foundation. It's just like a house, because today, when you think about a candidate, they're really the consumer, where it comes into, they want an easy way to be able to apply, just like if they're on Amazon. They want to be able to one-click apply and be able to get into that workflow and be able to capture that information before they drop off. So a big piece of that is making sure that when you have your optimization for each individual page that we're actually building, is that you're going to be representing that question that that answer that person is trying to get in that specific workflow. Now, integrations, built-in automations, there's going to be some pieces here that might overlap into the post-click optimization, but when we come into the next slide, it kind of gets into the piece of what has changed historically when it comes to kind of staffing websites. Now, historically, when we look at a website, they're typically outdated, the design, the bad first impressions. It really is like a business card, something that say they can put on your business card. Hey, go to my www.staffingfuture.com website, but historically, there was really few functional elements outside of here's a job or outside here going through our onboarding process. And what's changed is obviously an explosion in probably the last 10 years or so of kind of the technology automation and how we can actually implement those pieces of technology to, again, make sure that your website sits out. You're optimized to make sure that whoever comes to your site is going to be following a specific journey that you need them to take down, and be able to capture that information to build out those profiles. When it comes to the next slide, this is just going to be a technology stack evolution. Now, it's just one client example that we have of ours, but really, and one of it's pre-click optimization, some of it's post-click optimization. But if you went to Great Recruiters, if you went to Staffing Referrals, if you went to Herefish, any of these partners that I have listed on here, you're going to be noticing a common theme with their marketing messaging. Great Recruiters, real-time automated reviews, able, simplify and automate processes. Herefish or Sense, personalize and automate the candidate journey for re-engagement and retargeting. And that's the name of the game, is automation and implementing the right pieces of technology within those workflows along the way of the different pieces of the candidate journey. And so it starts at the top of the funnel, where we're going to be actually trying to drive traffic to those sites. And that could be with your search engine optimization of aggregating your jobs to the different aggregators like talent.com, AdZooner, My Job Helper, getting attraction from people online to be able to drive them to your site. If you go to the next slide of the candidate funnel example, that traffic build out, what we're actually building out here, is like where are they coming from, and tracking those unique tracking markers, building that, capturing the profile so that when we hand this candidate off to, they go into the TARS chatbot, or if we hand this person into the application workflow, our piece of the puzzle at that pre-click optimization is making sure that the foundation of the website is set up, that you have the right analytics in place, that you can get the source track of where these candidates are coming from or where these site visitors are coming from. We can start building a profile of these site visitors to understand what is that journey that's taking down the place, where is the bounce rate, where are we actually losing candidate or site visitation, so that we can consistently iterate and improve those results as we analyze the website performance and implement new technologies within that actually tool. So the candidate funnel example here is just one specific journey. Obviously, it's going to be different between whether it's a travel nurse to light industrial to a professional position, but the idea always starts at the very top of the funnel. And how do we get more people at the top to get through those workflows to be able to get to the point that either they're applying for a specific position or they're coming back to our site to re-engage with our services as that specific staffing agency within that marketplace. So with the pre-click optimization, when it comes to actually building out that funnel, is so vital, because once it's in place, there's only small iterations that you need to put in or changes that you need to do based off the analytics and data, because the foundation at the very core of it has been built on something that's strong and sturdy and been able to adapt throughout the life cycle of your actual website digital marketing strategy. So the whole point as we get through the funnels, or we talk about the website technology stacks and implementing the right pieces of technology for that candidate journey, is really the return on investment for the actual website in itself. So the next slide is just a small case study where, any digital marketing organization would say, yeah, we can increase site visitors by 250%. But if you're implementing the right technology and you put in the right pieces, workflows, it's not just about getting people to your site, it's converting those site visitors into qualified marketing leads. So the 700% increase for one of our clients, that when we implemented some of these technology stacks in place, it was something that basically paid for itself within the first couple of months of going live with the website. Because again, the pre-click optimization, understanding the strategy, putting that research into place is all about making sure that you're getting out of the gate and you're in the lead, basically. And when we talk about going into the post-click optimization for the next slide, it really kind of overlaps, because it is about starting that foundation. We're implementing, we're adapting, we're researching, and we're optimizing all those strategies into one place. But obviously the analytics and analyzing those strategies is going to be important once we actually go live and get into that post-click optimization world, where I left this slide in here just because I think it does transition really to what you're going to be talking about, Arnav, of like, what do we do once we get the candidate to the site, and then how do we nurture those candidates based off the technologies that we can put into place.
Awesome. Yeah, one thing that really resonated with me from what you said, Alex, is the idea that a lot of traditional websites, regardless of what industry or what use case you're using them for, tend to read like business cards, and you want them to be a lot more functional than that, at least in 2021, because that's what your stakeholders are expecting on the other end. I think the analogy that we tend to use is a lot of landing pages and websites feel like brochures. They feel like glorified digital brochures where you sort of dump a bunch of information on the site, expect the person who's on the site to read it, and then submit some information to you through a form. But that doesn't really work for a lot of end stakeholders today, because they're conditioned to expect good online experiences regardless of what they're doing, because of all the numerous apps that they use every day that are built by multinational corporations that invest millions of dollars into their design.
Yeah, 100%. That's the whole iteration. For us, it's not a static, your website should never be static, right? You should always be reviewing, analyzing, iterating, like Sabah says, business wins, reload, right. and always focus on what is actually the best practice and what is working for your organization based off of data.
Right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, this is something we've talked about in both our previous webinars. If there's one thing you should take away from this webinar, one tactic that you should take away from this webinar, it's that when you're thinking about your staffing sites, when you're thinking about your pages, think about them iteratively, because I think what a lot of folks do is they put their websites out there and they set it and then they forget it, which is not really the right
Yeah.
approach. Because obviously you're not going to be able to gauge what messaging is going to work the first time around. You're going to have to see how people interact with your site and adapt according to their needs. And of course, the stakeholders at the end, the prospective candidates that you're trying to get into your funnel, their needs and the sorts of messaging that resonates with them is going to change over time. The pandemic is perhaps an extreme example of this, but the sorts of things that prospective candidate is looking for before the pandemic, during the pandemic, as we're coming out of it, very different. And obviously your sites need to change accordingly, and the messaging on the sites needs to change accordingly to cater to that.
It's just the current marketplace that we are on the internet, right? It's just something like before, yeah, you could probably have a website and keep it there for 5 years and it wouldn't really have any difference. But in today's marketplace, you always have to try and stay on the cutting edge to make yourself more relevant within that marketplace.
Right.
And so it is work. It is something that you have to pay attention to. That's why we really approach it as a software as a service, not just a project-based type of environment. It's because we get it. We need to partner with you to be able to make sure we can drive the performance of the site forward, because it is your digital storefront as an organization. It's basically everybody goes to Google and says, hey, who are you? And you need to make sure that your message is accurate, but also it is changing to focus to what your candidates are doing. With staff, right, with travel nursing, for example, everybody has like the live the dream, travel here, live that, and they're really trying to put that message in place. But that message can get old and tired, because somebody might want that when they're 22, but when they're they're 32 and they're looking at a family, maybe they want to have something that's a little bit more concrete and something that they can sit in.
Absolutely. And I imagine also in the past year, at least, your messaging around that has to change, because the nature of work, being a travel nurse, is obviously changing considerably during the global health crisis. And I also love this diagram over here, because I think that people often have a very simplistic view of how their funnel looks like. You tend to look at it as a very linear, a linear structure, but in reality, there are a lot of moving parts. And if you want to stand out in the modern market, the reality is you do have to think. You do have to think kind of like this diagram. You have to think in a more complex way.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And continuously try things out. Don't be afraid to be able to put something into place, and use the analytics to be able to prove that it is actually a viable solution for your organization. And that's why we continuously like to partner with companies like TARS, because you guys bring a lot of value to your specific product set and how you can actually improve the results from the website standpoint.
Right. Absolutely. Getting some feedback from my team over here that my voice isn't coming through as clearly as it usually does. Try to move my mic a little closer. As I move my mic closer, though, let's move on to the post-click side of this picture, because obviously getting people to your site, getting them interested in the positions that you are advertising is only half of the picture. Once they are there, you still need to convert them. Into an actual lead on the other end that's in your funnel. So once they're a visitor, they're in play, they read the text, and you, maybe they like what they see. They like the messaging that you see, that they see, and you want to actually get them to move forward and become a lead in your funnel, candidate in your funnel. So how do you do this? Now, most staffing agencies out there, most marketers out there don't really think about this. We sort of assume that the only way to capture information from someone who's on your site is a form. We've always used forms. You're probably using forms right now. Most websites use forms. That's just the way you capture information, right? Throw some text on a page, add some form fields to capture the information that you need, and send that information to your CRM or your ATS, right? That's the traditional way of doing things. Well, I'm actually here to tell you that it's an imperfect solution, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's no secret that forms are unengaging. We fill them out, we tolerate them, but I don't think anyone out there likes filling out forms. Most people probably don't think about it. They're indifferent to it. But they certainly don't enjoy the process of filling out a form. It's not something that inspires joy in people. It's not something that inspires delight in people when they're on a website. It's kind of just a necessary task that you have to do to complete your interaction with a site. And that in 2021, as we were talking about, people have high expectations from their digital experiences. So it doesn't really cut it with a lot of stakeholders, even if they're not explicitly thinking about it. I don't think people are landing on your page and saying, actually, some people might actually. There's a form over here. I don't want to fill out a form. I'm going to close. Some people actually do things like that. I mean, when you look at how conversion rates drop when you add more form fields to your lead capture form, you can see the number of form fields actually correlates with your drop rate. So the more form fields you have, the fewer people that are actually converting. But the end result of using this unengaging method of capturing information from your prospective candidates is that you have a poor conversion rate. And when you have a poor conversion rate, what happens is your cost per lead, your cost for acquiring candidates goes up. Because, I mean, think about it this way. If you're investing money, the most explicit way you can understand this is if you're investing money in advertising positions and getting into people's social media feeds or getting into people's Google searches, you're investing cold, hard money to bring people to your site. Now, your ROI on that money that you invest into those ads is going to be defined by the number of people who actually convert once they click on your ad. And if your conversion rate is low, that ROI is also correspondingly going to be low. So the amount of money that you are spending per candidate that comes into your funnel is going to be relatively higher. Or another way to think about it is all of that time, effort, and money that you invest in setting up your campaigns, in setting up the channels to bring traffic to your site, are being wasted. And across industries, across verticals, across use cases, I think the average conversion rate on ads in particular is around somewhere below, definitely below 10%. So one way to think about it is this wasted time, effort, and money. That's 90% of your time, effort, and money that you're investing into your campaigns to bring people to your site is being wasted. And that is an outcome that a lot of folks take for granted because that's all we've ever known. But at ours, we don't think that that's the way things should be. We think that you should definitely get more ROI on all of that time, effort, and money that you're investing than you are today. So what do you do to fix this? And the answer that we've come up with is chatbots. So I'll tell you a little bit about how this solution works. Essentially, when you think about a chatbot, a lot of people tend to think in terms of AI and NLP. We've been conditioned by Hollywood, I think, to think of chatbots as these all-knowing, all-seeing virtual assistants that can do anything. Jarvis from Iron Man, that sort of thing. But in reality, when you think about it, a chatbot is just a piece of software that talks with a person to collect information from them and to give information to them. So a person can ask a chatbot a question about a certain position. It can ask a chatbot a question about a company, and the chatbot can do its best to respond to that question, to address that query that the site visitor has. And equally, the chatbot can ask the site visitor for information, the prospective candidate for information to capture their lead. So all of the same information that you're collecting through your forms today, you can capture them through a chatbot. The only difference is that instead of filling out a form field, they're sending a message to this chatbot to share that same piece of information. The outcome is the same at the end, but the way that you achieve it is very different. You're doing it through a conversation as opposed to a form. Now, this might seem like a cosmetic change to many. A lot of people, when we tell them this, they think it seems like a cosmetic change, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is capturing the same information that you were before. Why go through this roundabout way of using a conversation to capture that information when you have a form that's already there that already works for you? Well, there are three advantages to using a chatbot that we've identified. We've looked into this. When we started out, we noticed this conversion rate increase, and we weren't quite sure what was happening. We just knew it felt better to interact with the chatbot than a form. But we looked into it, and we found that there were three primary advantages at play, three mechanisms at play. over here. The first one, it has to do with engagement. I mean, this is a sort of vague term in any marketing play, really, where you want to increase engagement on your site. You want to increase engagement in your lead capture experience or in lead generation experience. But to specify it a little more, I think one way to think about it is engagement is the proclivity of your site visitors to want to stay on the site. If they're feeling engaged, they will want to stay on the site and they'll want to submit their information. And when we say that chatbots are more engaging than filling out a form, what we mean is that people would rather have a chat conversation than filling out a form. Like I said, we don't really think about forms all too much. They're kind of a chore. They're just a task that you have to do to complete the interaction, but it's not something that you particularly want to do. Conversations, on the other hand, are very different. If you collect the same information that you collect through a form, through a conversation instead, you are converting this bureaucratic form filling experience into an actual customer service experience where there is an agent, someone, or rather something, because it's a piece of software on the other end, that's taking out its time to collect information for you. And a good analogy is, I mean, you can think about this in person. If you walk into an office to buy, or think about it this way, you walk into a government office and you want to apply for a driver's license, or you want to apply for some sort of license. Either the person at the desk is going to hand you a clipboard with a form on it that you have to fill out on your own, or they're going to collect that information from you by asking you questions. Both of those processes have the same outcome. The details get collected and they get submitted so that you can apply for whatever it is you're applying for. But the feeling that you have as a stakeholder on the other end, when you're going through those processes, is very different. Filling out a clipboard is very different from having a conversation with someone. And it's the same thing on your website. Or maybe a better analogy for this one that I used in our last webinar as well is, if you're thinking about, like Alex mentioned, if you're thinking about your website as your digital storefront, you can compare having a form on your site. The analogy you can make is having a traditional website with a form on it is a self-serve experience, kind of like going to a grocery store, where you walk around, you pick out the information that you want, and then you go to checkout. And nowadays you can even do self-checkout, which is honestly a little more convenient in some cases. But you go to checkout, and then you check out your groceries. You don't really interact with anyone along the way. It's a self-serve. It's completely self-serve experience where you, the customer, do all the heavy lifting of finding your products and checking out. You can compare that to the experience you have in an Apple store, where when you walk into an Apple store, within a few minutes, if that, even within a few seconds, someone walks up to you, asks you why you're there, tries to answer your questions, guides you around, tells you the information that you want to know, as opposed to you going through all of the information on your own, and then walks you through the checkout experience. And that's what having a chatbot on your site is like. Again, same outcome. You're still checking out at the end, and you're still buying your product at the end. But the experience in that digital store is very different. You're actually getting someone to walk you through that process, and it becomes a customer service experience. So that's what we mean by chatbots being more engaging. They sort of hold the hand of your prospective candidates through the process of submitting their details to you. The second advantage that we have noticed that chatbots have has to do with mobile optimization. The way I like to think about it is the chat is the first or one of the only true native mobile experiences. And what I mean by that is that if you think about traditional websites and landing pages and forms, they were built first for the desktop, and then they were ported over to the phone. And even today, when we build websites, we build them on our laptops, we build them on our desktops first, and then software automatically mobile optimizes it for us, ensures that everything's readable so that people can read it on their phones. With chat interfaces, on the other hand, they sort of went the other way. When you think about the first chat interfaces that came about, texting, WhatsApp, all manner of messengers out there that people have used in the past. When you think about the chat that we use today with message bubbles popping up on the screen, they started out as a mobile experience, and then they made their way to desktop. And because they started out as mobile experience, they were built from the ground up with the mobile user in mind. And that makes them considerably easier to use than something that went the other way. And I'll give you a simple example of of how this actually manifests itself in the actual using of a chatbot versus the using of a form. When you're using a form, the form fields cover the entire page they cover your entire screen. You have to tap on the individual fields and then your keyboard pops up and you fill them out, right? With the chat, I mean, we're used to doing that, so we don't really think much about it, right? The fields are all over the page. You tap all over the page to fill out those form fields. With a chatbot, on the other hand, all of the input happens at the bottom of the screen. The input UI, where you type your messages out, it's all at the bottom of the screen. You don't need to tap around the screen. You just need to tap at the bottom of the screen. Very different than a form. Now, if you think about how you hold your phone, naturally your fingers tend to sit at the bottom of the screen. When you're holding your phone, your thumb is at the bottom of the screen. That's where when you type, the keyboard pops up at the bottom of the screen. Your fingers are naturally over there. Now, this might seem like a small difference, but it reduces the friction associated with submitting your details. It's considerably easier to interact with a chat interface on your phone because of that simple change of having the input at the bottom of the screen than it is to navigate your way around a form, click on the specific fields that you need to, and then move back to the bottom of the screen to type your details out. And that reduction in friction makes it easier for people to actually submit their details, which again, increases their likelihood of making it through the entire process. And the end result of this, I think I should have had one more slide here. Maybe we can talk about it if we have time at the end. We're about 20 minutes till the end. But the end result of these two changes is that you get a higher conversion rate and a lower CPL because your lead generation experience is more engaging, because it's easier to use on smartphones, which is how people are increasingly interacting with the internet. They're more likely to actually submit their details because you're reducing friction in that process. And because they're more likely to submit those details, you're not increasing the amount of time, effort, or money that you're investing in your marketing campaigns, in bringing people to your candidate sites, to your job postings. But you are converting more of them into actual candidates that enter your CRM or your ATS. And because you're converting more people who land on your site, because you're convincing them to actually submit their details to you, the cost per lead that you have is going down as well, because you're spending the same amount of money, but you're getting more candidates on the other side. So your cost per lead is going down. And obviously, if you zoom out even more, your ROI is going up. So you're investing the same amount of time, effort, money into getting candidates, but you are getting more candidates on the other end without changing anything but the lead capture experience. And obviously you iterate on it just like we talked about with your website, but overall you're increasing your ROI just by changing the way you ask for the same details that you do. And rather than just show you, rather than just show you what, rather than just tell you what this looks like, I'm actually going to show you what one of these chatbots look like. I can't actually show you an actual customer deployment because obviously their information and their flows are proprietary. But recently, the reason I chose this chatbot in particular, because this is one that I actually use. So we were hiring an intern for the TARS digital marketing team to help us out with some of our work. And hiring an intern seems quite easy, but the number of applications we were getting was far more than we could handle individually. And we were seeing our productivity drop. So what we did was we created a screening chatbot that automated a lot of the conversations that we would have otherwise had to have ourselves to collect details from our prospective candidates and to actually move them to the next stage of the application process. So I'll show you what this screening chatbot looks like. I actually built this in. So the slide before said, isn't this hard to build? The reason I wanted to pull this one up is because I knew we had this webinar coming up. So I actually timed how long it took us to build this chatbot. And it took us around 30 minutes to build a basic chatbot that collects all of the information that you need, that collected all of the information that we needed for this position. And obviously it's an intern position, so we didn't need to collect that many details. But if you have a more advanced position or a position higher up in the hierarchy, it'll take more time because you have to collect more details, and it's probably more, your qualification questions are a lot more complex, but it's not going to take all too long. So here we're just screening them. We're making sure that they're available to work by a certain time. We're making sure that they're available full time. And we are making sure that they're available for 6 months. Super easy for them to go through. Asking them all of this through a form. If it was a form, I imagine a lot of folks would have dropped by this point had they graduated. We only want folks who are close to graduating, because the way we work at TARS is we hire people first. Even I went through this process. We hire people first as an intern, and then we transition them into a full-time position. But let's say we've graduated from college. Awesome. And now we collect their information. So it's a basic lead generation flow. Could have otherwise been done through a form. Another thing that I didn't talk about over here that makes it more engaging is that we can add a little bit of personality to a conversation, because obviously in a form, you can't really add GIFs or emoji, which would appeal to maybe people who are coming out of college, but in a chatbot, you can. For this position, it would make sense. Obviously, for positions elsewhere in the hierarchy, this might not make sense. But yeah, that's what it looks like in practice. And you can obviously it's extensible, so you can change the specific details that you want pretty easily to optimize it for the specific position you are hiring for. But that is pretty much it from our end. I think we can move on to the Q&A section now. We have about 16 minutes left. If you guys do have any questions about any of the stuff that Alex and I have talked about, feel free to ask them right now. If you don't have any questions and you need to leave and you think of a question after the webinar is over, you can reach out to us through these contact details over here. You can reach out to me personally at my email. That's the TARS phone number over there. You can text us, call us, what have you, and we'll be sure to respond to you. You can actually reach out to us on WhatsApp as well, I think, on this number. Maybe one of my teammates can confirm that for me in the chat. Yeah. Or you can just go to our website and find out more about us. And you can book a demo over there. And I would suggest booking a demo. Maybe one of my colleagues can share our demo link, because a demo is basically just a personalized webinar where it'll just be you and one of our chatbot experts on a call, and we'll walk you through a lot of the same things, but customized to your specific needs and customized to your specific business. And I think it's a similar case for Alex and Staffing Future, right? You can contact Alex through his email over here and go to the Staffing Future website to learn more about what they do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep, we have the demo link over here. My good friend Ish over here has been kind enough to share the demo link for TARS in the chat. So if you guys want to book a demo with us to learn more about how you can use chatbots in your staffing funnels, in your talent funnels, be sure to book a demo with us and we can help you out.
Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking when you're talking about forms and comparatively, I think for the user itself, I think like instant gratification to your questions is kind of a thing. A form, you have to fill it out and then wait. But I really kind of like how the chatbot has that interactiveness where for the user, they're actually having that engagement where you're talking about engagement, right. But it's like getting that gratification. It's like, hey, I'm actually getting the answers to what I need to do.
Right. And honestly, I think that a lot of user experience, we tend to think of it as being small or cosmetic changes, but they actually make a pretty big difference. When you zoom out and you look at the data, they actually make a pretty big difference to your ROI or to your bottom line. Something as simple as, one thing about chatbots is that because of the way conversations are structured, you send a little bit of information at a time, and then you wait for the person on the other end to respond to you before sending them more information. And that back and forth nature, we don't think about it all too much because we have these chat conversations every day, but it adds a little bit of visual stimulation to the lead generation experience that actually keeps people hooked. Because in a form, you load the entire form in one go and people fill the form out on their own. With a chatbot, on the other hand, there's a new message bubble popping up on the screen every few seconds that catches the user's attention, whether it's subliminal or not, but it catches their attention because there's a new element popping up on the screen that catches their eye. And that actually goes a long way in making them actually stay on the page and submit their details to you.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned because like websites, I think you said like 10% might be a good return. Yeah, they are the leakiest ships like on the
Oh yeah.
out there basically. And so it's a game of inches of what can you do to be able to just maybe capture one more candidate or one more visitor and just have
Right.
and be able to continuously just do a little bit more, taking that site that might in a scale of
Right.
like a 1 to 10, let's say you're at a 5, you want to get to a 7, and how are we going to do that in the next 12 months or 6 months to be able to move your site forward and
Absolutely.
implementing something like that, like with TARS, just as I mentioned, just another element
Absolutely.
to be able to make sure that you can plug some of those holes in that leaky ship.
Yep. And the conversion rate increases that we generally see, they fall in the 50 to 200% range, more close to the 50% range. But even if you consider a 50% increase in conversion rate, if you had to increase the number of candidate leads that you were capturing in a month by 50%, and you had just your traditional levers at your disposal, what could you do? You could make minor tweaks to your website to conversion rate to optimize it for a higher conversion rate. You could maybe change your targeting a little bit, but the gains that you're going to get from that are going to be marginal. At the end of the day, the vast majority of that increase that you're looking for, the only real lever that you have is to increase the amount of money that you're spending to bring traffic to your site. Mm-hmm. And increasing your ad spend by 50% is a considerable cost for most people. On the other hand, if you just replace your form with a chatbot, you can spend the same amount on your ads, but you can increase the number of candidates entering by 50%. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense to folks out there.
I get it. I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. That's why we don't have any questions today, because we just did such a good job of explaining everything that we wanted to explain.
Yeah.
All right. So I see some people dropping off. I think that today we don't really have a question heavy day. That was not the plan. I don't know why I had our lead generation why I had our lead generation chatbot linked over there. But let's try to move to the next slide. Yep. But before we close out this webinar, if you guys have any other questions for us, feel free to reach out to us through these details. As always, we will put the recording of this webinar up on our website and for free, so everyone can access it. And we will put the slide deck up as well. So if you want to check that out, it'll be up on our website shortly after the webinar is over. So keep a lookout for that. We almost definitely will send you guys an email with a link to the webinar again, the webinar page again, so that you can access both of those things. But thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Alex, for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you guys.
A lot. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking